All right, Nate, why is that the standout?
When I was speaking earlier about this being the first album that affected me in a personal way and not just an emotional way with like shallow catharsis, Time is an exploration of, I mean, it's in the title. It's the slow passage of time through through your life. Think about it for a second. But
Get a grip. Come on.
What I find so interesting about this piece of work is that the passage of time and the inescapable nature of the future advancing rapidly at a pace that you can't control or change. That is the existential crisis that everyone is dealing with.
Yep. You
are born. At the end, there is death. In the middle, there is time. And you're alive. Mm-hmm. You're alive for a short, relatively speaking, period of time. And it's your opportunity to do something. And if you read the lyrics of this song, which you should, if you listen to the album, you should have the lyrics pulled up with you. The lyrics of this song deal with somebody who realizes too late that they've spent their life doing things that aren't important. There is, in specific, I still remember the first time I really clocked this. I really heard this lyric. So this song is about a person sort of slowly realizing that time is happening to him. And there's this stanza in the middle of the song. You run and you run to catch up with the sun, but it's sinking, racing around to come up behind you again. The sun is the same in a relative way, but you're older, shorter of breath, and one day closer to death. Like, the first time I ever heard that, I was probably 12 years old. And it was like, it felt like my head was an egg and it got cracks on the countertop. You know what I mean? It got cracks on the side of a bowl. I was like, holy shit.
Yeah.
It's true. What he's saying is true. And that's what's so beautiful about this album is that the lyrics there is no sort of like individual perspective. This whole album is a look at what it means to be a person. That specific moment with time where this guy's wrestling with time and realizing that there's nothing you can do. It just keeps going and going. And
did that scare the shit out of you?
Of course it scared the shit out of me. It scares the shit out of me today. You've got one life.
I guess I wonder, do you have moments like that more often now in your place in life that you are now? I mean, you're a dad now and you feel time on a whole bunch of different levels. I guess I wonder how this song sits with you now and that notion of the timer that is happening to us.
I guess so. I think that what it really did was it started a lifelong philosophy that I have, which is that you shouldn't wait. Like this is a very, very important moment in my, like, the beginning of my psyche was listening to this song, feeling the pain of this person that the perspective is, and realizing that at any moment you could be losing time. I continue to have this philosophy. Like there's a lot of moments where I have to snap myself awake from like waiting for something to happen to me in my personal life and take charge of it and do it myself. And I don't know. I think for a piece of pop music from the 1970s, that's a pretty amazing result that it's had in my personal life. You know what I mean? It's not just one of the most face-meltingly perfect guitar solos of the entire 20th century and pieces of music as a whole, but it has a message that like spurred me to do things like get married or to do things like make a movie when I don't have the ability to really figure it out. Like have, your life could slip away from you, and it instilled in me a passion for making that not happen. I don't know. That's phrased in the negative, but you understand what I mean. Yeah.
No, I mean you've been this way as long as I've known you. It's in the DNA, as it were.
Sure. Thank Roger Waters.
I do thank Roger Waters for that, because I think it's really, to what you're saying could sound trite, right? Like what
that's what I mean.
Right. And this is this conversation we keep having over and over again versus of the universal versus the general, right? The ability for somebody to create any kind of art, whether it's a poem, a film, a song, an album, whatever it might be, that manages to be so precise in its construction that it unlocks the ability for you to feel your vast humanness, is fucking, I don't know how. I mean, is it kismet? Is it kismet? Is it blood, sweat, and tears? Is it?
Well, no, I think it is that is the power of art, is that when properly applied, can change your life, can change your worldview. And
set your values. It's like it did for you.
Sometimes I get really music criticism, art criticism, theater criticism, sometimes really drives me nuts. Or like the thing I hated so much. I remember senior year, AP English, having to explain or interpret a poem. And I was like, this is fucking bullshit, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because
what do you mean interpret? Like, what are you talking about?
Well, that's the thing. And I think that like it used to get me so upset because I would realize that any sort of interpretation or explanation, or if you try and boil something down to a message, you've now reduced it. And so you were talking about like, there's a concern that like maybe the message of the song Time comes across as trite. If you just isolate the message, maybe it does, but when it's part of the song, when it's the lyrics combined with the music as part of the album package, that's what has the effect. It's when you try and explain it too much that it starts to kind of like, then you start to go like, wait, what is it really saying? That's why it's like, no, you got to just listen to the song and experience the art rather than just the message.
Yes. And I'd say that's an important part of the consumption of this album, is that you are on a ride and you have to release yourself to what's happening. It's like a symphony. It's a piece of works that is total. And so you don't like pick and choose and skip tracks. Like you start and it brings you through and then you finish. And what's beautiful about it is that it is exactly produced and synchronized so that if you just had it on repeat, it would start over at exactly the same place where it ends. Which is, of course, part of the whole message of the thing. But all deep truths, all deep philosophical truths appear trite to those who are uninitiated, right? Like if you say something that you can't feel the deep meaning of it, but is philosophically true, it sounds trite because the truths are trite. You know what I mean? Like time is slipping away from you. Like a 14-year-old might say, it's somebody who's not ready to hear that message might say, yes, so what? Duh, I already knew that. But like if you're in a place to receive that message and like think about it on a deeper level, then you can understand the truth of it.
Yeah, I think as a 14-year-old, I was like, I think that is true. I think I can feel it so acutely. I can feel my life changing so much almost every day. Thank God for stuff like this that can like kind of put that into language that maybe a young person can understand as well. You talk about this being like a pop. I think one of the things maybe that I didn't hook into this album from a younger age, it wasn't introduced to me by somebody, and I didn't just find it by, I didn't just find it in the way that you did. And then I think there was probably some sort of like quote unquote classic rock. I was like maybe kind of trying to move away from classic rock when I would have maybe discovered this. Sure. Like I had this idea in my head of what Dark Side of the Moon was, but
it's dad music.
Dad music, exactly.
Listeners, I implore you, it might be dad music, but your dad's a person too. So
your dad's a hell of a person, and the and the thing is that there is a softness with which I have found myself coming to this album in preparation for this episode, right? It's almost like maybe you shouldn't do this with any music, but you can't just turn it on and like stare it directly in the face and say, fucking make me feel something, right? You sort of have to let it come to you in a way. You have to let it wash over you to feel all of the dynamics of it.
What I think is beautiful, yes, and you're right. What I think is beautiful about this album is that it does that for you. Yeah. The very first track, "Speak to Me," is a bass drum that's been muffled to sound like a human heartbeat, and a bunch of recordings, which this album is peppered with recordings of various roadies and staff that worked at Abbey Road, which is where it was recorded.
Yeah.
That the band and Alan Parsons, the producer, collected, and they're sort of mixed into this heartbeat that crescendos into the very first musical track, "Breathe." But it starts with like these vocals and these random like recordings and these snippets and this heartbeat that then comes into "Breathe." At the very beginning of "Breathe," there's a vocalist that's wailing and like going through catharsis and like screaming, and then you hear this first E minor chord that just like splays out in front of you, and it's like going through a birth canal. Like if you put your headphones on and listen to this, it's like being born into the album. Yeah. And I think it's really beautiful and genius that Pink Floyd did that, because it sort of softens your brain to receive it.
You're here.
You know? You're here. Like you're okay. You don't you don't press like play and then it goes like, "We all live in a yellow submarine." It's not song. It's like this beautiful like intro into this like crazy complex piece of music, and it leads you into it and it guides you through the thing, which is a testament to the genius of the band and the producer.
Well said. You're on a roll here. So let's go right into the kind of thesis here of, we asked you to nominate perfect albums, and you've done a damn fine job already kind of setting up the pillars here of like why you think this album is in particular is perfect. But what were some of the general sort of like guidelines that you were using or standards you were using when you were deciding which albums you were going to nominate for us?
Yes, an album that is perfect should shake your standards and break your paradigm. So each album that I nominated shook me from my preconceived notions and entered me into a new. It cracked the mirror that I am and made a new, different way in which to see myself. Yeah. If you see what I mean. Totally. So this Dark Side of the Moon was the very first one that completely blew my head off about what music could be. Like music could be this whole total package cinematic experience that like takes you on a journey and like tells you deep truths about yourself. That was why I nominated this album.
I mean, that's a nice little package, isn't it?
Yeah. I'm assuming no skips.
If there was a skip, it would probably be On the Run. But in my opinion, you shouldn't skip. You shouldn't skip.
Right.
Like, there's a moral imperative not to skip.
And you cannot put this album on shuffle either.
If you put this album on shuffle, actually, this was an album written for lunatics. So if you took this album and put it on shuffle, it might be for you. It might be about you.
It probably is.
Yeah.
I wish, my dad liked this album a lot. We definitely saw multiple laser light shows set to this album.
Sorry.
I don't think we ever owned it on vinyl, but the first 5 and the second 5 are each meant to be a side, and they're essentially one continuous track. Yes. And I think there's like, if the first half is kind of like a journey about, it's kind of sort of like a life cycle in some ways, and then it feels like the second half is like, I don't know, wrestling with capitalism, perhaps.
Sure. Definitely, yeah, wrestling with systems and hierarchies, and the way that one have to exist in then and now in the latter half of the 20th century.
Yeah, I remember this album being one of the first that I ever listened to that felt like it really had an arc. Like it really reached a cathartic point. It is sequenced, like not just properly, but it's like it's imperative that you listen to it in this sequence because of the way it has all been laid out.
Exactly. Yes.
And they say that this is one of the first concept albums in the way that we now understand what a concept album is, I guess, in terms of like having a unified theme or set of themes that notable in that way, I think. It's hard for me to believe that there weren't concept albums before this.
They were called like symphonies. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But like this was a suite of music, and what you got to understand about Pink Floyd's artistic process at this time when they were making this album was that they had been experimenting with these like songs that would take an entire album half, like Echoes specifically. Metal is another album that is really important to my particular musical journey. But Echoes is the B-side of that album. And it's this 23-minute long song that has a beginning and ending, but goes into like whale sounds in the middle of it, like made by guitars. It's like crazy. It's crazy. Yeah. But they were also doing a lot of soundtracks for movies at the time. So they were composing entire soundtracks that did, have to follow a narrative arc through a movie. And there were certain there's a movie called Zabriskie Point that there's a long section of music they composed for this called the violent section that they turned into Us and Them. And then they're recording there's a movie called The Body that was literally just like a BBC like anthropology movie about like anatomy, but like they recorded a whole suite of music for that. So what they were doing at this time in their process as a band was making suites of music. And so it's no surprise that The Dark Side of the Moon comes as a total package, because they had been touring and playing like, hour-long shows of like beginning to end music. And we're doing so during the entire recording of this album as well.
Like I've watched a few little docs here and there about, them talking about their own music. And it's really cool how lucidly they speak about the time that they spent together, and kind of like relationally, it sounds like it went downhill. It went downhill after The Wall, kind of, and maybe just like one might argue, maybe it was even starting to go downhill after this tour of Dark Side of the Moon.
Yeah, but that's deep in the future. I mean, like basically what happened was they were all struggling artists together until this point. And then when they sold this album, they all made millions of dollars and bought their estates and cars and whatever. But up until this, they had been going through an artistic crucible that started way back when in the 1960s, when they cut a couple of singles, when as you said so succinctly, Michael, earlier, when they were architectural students, and they were led by Syd Barrett. Yeah.
Poor Syd. What a sad story, huh?
Yeah. There's a lot of people that I know who like Pink Floyd fans who think that The Piper at the Gates of Dawn is the best album, and that Syd Barrett really was the genius that started Pink Floyd. And I would have to disagree with them there. I think so. Syd Barrett was a guy who was predisposed to schizophrenia, who started dabbling with a lot of drugs in the late 1960s, especially as he got into this band. And that exacerbated his pre-existing mental illness, and it wound up in a psychotic break that eventually led to his getting kicked out of the band. Right.
Like you do.
It was that moment in the band's existence that created this great explosion of genius that we're witness to. It was literally Roger Waters watching his friend go insane that created all of the entire catalog that people think of as the best works, or maybe the most important works of Pink Floyd.
Well, because not just Dark Side, but also The Wall. I mean, the main character is sort of meant to be kind of a hybrid of Roger Waters' own experience as a rock star, but also like trying to get into the mind of his friend Syd Barrett. And that's kind of where that character from The Wall comes from.
And Wish You Were Here, which I would say a Pink Floyd contrarian would say is the actual Goes to 11 album. I would say that Dark Side, because it's their flagship album, gets that title, but Wish You Were Here was a letter to Syd Barrett. About like how much they missed him, what it must be like you listen to that album, you can hear them like their hearts breaking for their friend and wishing that he could just come back how he was.
Yeah, man, that's your skin in the game, huh? That's
but like all the way through, they'd been writing about him since he left the band, which was in 1968.
Yeah,
and Dark Side comes out in 1973, and they put out like 5 albums in between then.
Right. Yeah, they were still wrestling with it.
They were, they all the way through their career. It is maybe what defined them.
So you kind of mentioned we're getting close. We're getting close here. We're gonna have to unfortunately come towards the end here. But I want to know a little bit more, just because you are. I'll go a little sappy here for a second. You and Michael are 2 of the artists who I most admire in my life, that I've had the pleasure of working with in any different way. So I guess I wonder,
I love you, and you're terribly kind for saying that.
I love you. You're a great guy. And so how would you say, and you've already spoken to this a little bit, but I want to hear you say it again before we end, is like, how would you say this experience of holding Pink Floyd in your heart and holding this kind of music in your heart, holding those artistic values in your heart, how would you say it's influencing your own creativity nowadays with the stuff that you make, with whether that's as a actor, whether that's as a filmmaker? How does it live in you? How do you channel that?
There's a term that every first year acting student in college has to learn, which is Gesamtkunstwerk, which means total piece of art.
Yeah.
And I think that anything that I try and make in my life, whether it's a movie or whether I'm just, a piece of a piece of art, like as an actor, I'm trying to create something that is as full in its totality as The Dark Side of the Moon. I mean, I feel like I would be remiss to say we haven't even talked about like what the songs are. It's fucking
it goes quick, man. It goes quick. Yeah.
I'm just saying. Okay, so the songs are like about money and war and about time slipping away from you and about death. There's this amazing song called "Great Gig in the Sky" that has no lyrics.
So good.
Yeah, but
so good.
They contracted this woman to come in and she improvised the song where she sings along to the music. Claire Torrey, yes, who was not given royalties but won a legal battle with them later on in the 21st century, I believe.
Good on you, Claire.
And
was your money, girl.
Paid in full, hopefully.
Yeah.
But she gives the performance of a lifetime. She improvises the sound of what it must feel like to have to come to terms with your own death.
Yeah.
Like, this is what we're talking about. Like,
these are the stakes, people.
I've been effusive about this album, and I've hopefully not been too hyperbolic, but it's about the human experience in total. Like you have to listen to these songs. The final songs, Brain Damage and Eclipse, are about mental illness, and Eclipse brings the whole thing into a thematic crescendo, and then ends back in the heartbeat that it started in. It's a circle. You can listen to it infinitely, and I don't know, maybe you should.
You know what? I think maybe they should. Maybe maybe our listeners should. Oh, it's that time, Michael, isn't it?
It sure is. I believe we've reached the
dun dun deliberation phase. All right, I'll start today. So you can round it out. I'm big time biased with this one. I just like him so much, like this is something I would pay.
Do not be moved by his pretty face.
I'm not moved by his pretty face. I could have turned his video off, and it would have been his dulcet tones, his sweet turn of phrase, his passion with which he speaks about everything. It's just one of the things that I think. I think back on the person that I was when I was looking at this album, and I was like, whatever. I don't really need to listen to that. Like as a young person, where I was like, I don't care if it's a classic, whatever that means, right? So I never found it until recently. Obviously, no great loss. I came to it eventually. I think this notion of the work of art that fundamentally changes you is the thing we keep coming back to. In this project, and it's the thing that I love to hear people talk about, and that the image of you sitting up there, I'm imagining a little boom box that you put your CD into in your headphones, and sitting there as a young person and just being disintegrated with this epiphany moment is so well said, and kind of you building the blocks of how this album sends a universal message about our experience, this unifying thing of what is consciousness and what are we supposed to do about it, and makes that into a pop record. I mean, that's a hell of a good case for something you might consider a perfect album. I just feel like this is something now that I feel confident I'm going to keep listening to this album. And this happens a lot on this show, is somebody speaks so succinctly and so beautifully about something where I'm like, oh, now I have all this richness to go back to. So I think it's the mark of a good case. What about you, Michael?
Let me make my face ugly real quick.
Go roll in the dirt. I mean, okay, a few things. First, I appreciate that we did not get into a conversation about Roger Waters' complicated politics, so that's a check in your favor.
Yeah.
It's immaterial.
I appreciate that you like have the same sort of feeling I do about like you don't need to be under the influence of psychedelics to appreciate this album. I definitely the whole like this being the first album that like really shook you is something that like I think I can relate to, and that like that really spoke to me. But I mean, I don't know. I think also just the sort of you wrestling with the fact that this album is covering such universal things that makes it feel like it should be trite, but because of the whole package that it's put into, it sort of like, you know, rises above that. And I think that like, I don't know, I think that was, and you just came prepared, Nate. You knew stuff about the band and the history here. So
no half measures from Nate Simpson.
No. So I mean, I'm going to approve it, but I think we got to put it to Tyler. So Tyler, ignore the fact that Nate's one of, you know, your dearest friends in the world. You've heard his case. He's tried to make himself ugly for you.
Tyler, please.
So what do you think, based on his case, based on what he's brought forward today? Pink Floyd, The Dark Side of the Moon. Is this a perfect album? Does it go to 11? Can it join the pantheon, Tyler?
Damn right it can. Put it in.
That's right.
In the pantheon.
That's right, baby.
That's right.
That's right. I would say thank you so much for certifying me, by the way. You beautiful man. I'm so grateful to be in your presence today. One more thing I'd like to say, even like artistic merits notwithstanding, this album was on the Billboard Top 100 for a record amount of time. It spent 18 complete years on the Billboard Top 100.
Yeah.
It went multi-platinum, and it is a weird art rock album. So I just have to say on that alone, like,
isn't that funny?
Listen, if the glove don't fit, you must certify this album.
You must. You know, we love all of our albums and all of our guests, obviously, but it does feel like sometimes we're in that echelon. That maybe we need to examine that echelon a little bit more. But I put this right up there. with The Beautifuls by Carole King, with The Purple Rains by Prince. Like this is on that tier of album that
it's in the canon.
It's in the canon and it bears so much re-listening. There's so much here. It's like it's just rich, people. You got to listen to this album if you've never listened to it before. You're in for a treat. Revisit.
One more thing I will say, if I have time.
Go for it.
This album is in music can access an entire spectrum of emotions. A lot of people depend on music for catharsis, or for sadness, or for anger. But this album will also make you laugh. Some of the best musicians, the people who are most in possession of their craft. Like I watched Yo-Yo Ma one time at the Chicago Symphony Orchestra. He was able to do something with his cello that like electrified the audience, broke out into like laughter. This is the same echelon of material. Like it can get you into different places that you aren't even expecting to go to. And so I think for that alone, listen to this album. Please just open your minds and let it in.
We couldn't have said it better ourselves.
Nate, what do you got going on? Obviously, we're in some crazy shit right here in Los Angeles.
Me and my family and my belongings.
And your belongings, just traveling around to wherever you need to go to get away from the fires. This is your opportunity to shout out. We already shouted out Stephanie Stevens in your bio, but you want to tell people a little bit more about it. Tell people where to find you, how to support you, and all your doings. Go.
Yes. Stephanie Stevens is my debut feature film. I wrote it. I acted in it along with my wife, who also directed it.
Friend of the pod, Kelsey Ann Wacker, who spoke about Joni Mitchell's Blue. Excellent episode.
It is at Stephanie Stevens Film. Stevens with a V, not a PH. At Stephanie Stevens Film on Instagram, and we are doing the film festival circuit, starting with Idlewild Cinema Fest in March, and also the Phoenix Film Festival, and many more to come. Yeah. So follow us on Instagram, and you can see hopefully the beginning of a long and storied cinematic career.
Dude, no doubt about it. Kelsey Ann's got another bun in the oven. You know.
True. Yeah. My wife's pregnant again. We're doing round 2.
Round 2, baby. Little family's growing. God,
right.
Love it. Right. You are you're a perfect man.
I'm rubber, you're glue. Everything that you say to me bounces off me and sticks to you.
I'll take it.
And Michael, you too.
Thank you for the afterthoughts.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming on, buddy. This is the best.
Yes, of course. I hope I was able to help. I hope I was able to make this exciting and interesting and engaging, and not just monologue stupid shit.
No, dude, it was great.
Well, dear listeners, tell us what you think. Listen to the album. Follow us on the social medias, whichever ones exist right now. And, maybe come back and join us next week. Maybe we'll talk about another album. What do you think, Tyler? Should we do it?
I think we probably will. We'll probably come back next week, too. Right. So won't be Nate next week, but it'll be someone great.
You rhymed again. All right. Thanks so much, Nate. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you later.
Thank you.
Bye.